The girl was 7 years old, maybe 8. She was sitting on the leather bench outside his office like she had every right to be there. Backpack in her lap, legs swinging because they didn't quite reach the floor, eyes tracking every person who walked past. Not scared, just waiting. Dominic Harrell noticed her on his way back from the executive conference room, coffee in one hand, a folder of quarterly projections in the other. He slowed his pace without meaning to. His assistant, Troy, caught up beside him and lowered his voice. "She's been there since 2:15. Asked for you by name. Said she needed to talk to the man in charge of the building." Dominic looked at his watch. It was nearly 3. "Where's security?" "She didn't cause trouble. She just sat down and said she'd wait." He looked at her again, small, a pink cardigan, 2 uneven braids. She was holding a library book across her knees like a tray, the cover face down. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't crying, she was just sitting there with the kind of patience that children almost never have unless something very serious is pressing down on them. "Find out who she belongs to," Dominic said, and kept walking. Troy caught up again 30 seconds later. "She says her name is Bea. She says her mom works here, on the 4th floor." Dominic stopped. He turned around. He told himself afterward that he only went back because of liability. A child alone in an office building. Protocol. He had legal obligations. That's what he told himself. But the truth, and he would not admit this for a long time, was that something in the way she was sitting on that bench got under his skin. She looked exactly like a person who had made a very hard decision and was sticking to it. He walked back to the bench and crouched down so he was at her level. She looked at him without flinching. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. "Are you the one in charge?" "I am." She seemed to consider this the way children do when they're checking whether an adult is actually telling the truth. "My name is Bah," she said. "My mom's name is Claire Sutton. She works in bookkeeping." "Okay," Dominic said. "I need to ask you something." "Okay." She reached into the front pocket of her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper. She unfolded it carefully. It had clearly been folded and unfolded several times already, and looked at it like she was reviewing notes before an exam. "I wrote it down," she said, "so I wouldn't forget." Dominic waited. She looked up from the paper. "Can you please let my mom come home on time, just regular time, like other people?" He didn't say anything right away. He hadn't been expecting that. "She works late every night," Bea continued, still looking at him directly, like she'd rehearsed this part too. "And on Saturdays. And sometimes she goes back in on Sundays, and when she comes home her hands shake." She paused. "Did you know her hands shake?" "I didn't know that," Dominic said. "They shake when she eats dinner. She thinks I don't see, but I do." She folded the paper back up. "She had a doctor visit last week. She didn't tell me, but I found the paper on the counter. It said elevated cortisol. I looked it up." She looked at him steadily. "That means she's too stressed. It's bad for your heart." Dominic felt something shift behind his sternum. Not guilt, not yet. Something closer to the sensation you get when you step onto ice and feel it flex under your weight. "How old are you?" he asked. 8, she said. "I'm in 3rd grade. I walked here from school. It's 11 blocks. "You walked 11 blocks by yourself." "I know how to cross at the light," she said, with the faint impatience of someone being asked a question that isn't the point. He almost smiled. He caught it. "Does your mom know you're here?" "No." She looked down at her backpack for a second, then back up. She would have said don't, but she would have said it in a tired way, the way she says everything now. She bit her lip. She used to sing when she cooked. She doesn't anymore. The ice under his feet flexed again. "My dad left when I was 5, Bea said in the same even tone she'd used to cite the cortisol results. "Just facts. It's just me and Mom. She doesn't want me to worry, so she pretends she's fine. But she's not fine." She looked at him. "I think if she keeps going the way she's going to get really sick. And then I won't have anybody." The lobby was quiet for a moment. Someone's phone buzzed in a distant office. The ventilation system pushed soft air through the ceiling vents. Dominic Harrell, who had run Herald Capital Group for 9 years, who had sat across the table from men who markets and hadn't blinked, who had been told more than once that he had ice water in his veins, sat on his heels in front of an 8-year-old girl and did not know what to say. "I'm not asking for a lot," Bea said quietly. "I'm asking for regular, just normal hours, like a regular job." She folded her hands in her lap over the library book. "I brought a book so I could wait," she added. "I didn't know how long it would take." He had Troy call downstairs. Claire Sutton was in the 4th floor accounting office, at her desk, unaware that her daughter had walked 11 blocks and talked her way past the front desk by telling the security guard, truthfully, that she had an appointment. When Claire appeared at the elevator, her face had a particular quality that Dominic recognized immediately. The practiced calm of a person who is keeping it together in front of strangers through sheer force of will, because falling apart is not something she can afford to do. She saw Bea on the bench and went straight to her, dropped down in front of her the way parents do, hands on her daughter's face. Bea, how did you get here? Are you okay? Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. I'm fine, Bea said patiently. I talked to the man in charge. Claire looked up. She met Dominic's eyes and he saw the exact moment she understood what her daughter had done. Her expression went through several things in rapid succession: mortification, fear, something that might have been a kind of exhausted despair. She stood up. Her hands were still shaking. Mr. Harrell, she said. I am so sorry. She shouldn't have. I had no idea she was coming here. I would never have allowed. It's all right, he said. It is not all right. It is absolutely not. She pressed her hands together, stilling them. I'm so sorry. Whatever she said, she doesn't understand how. It's not how she made it sound. Mrs. Sutton, he said. Miss, she said automatically. Mrs. Sutton. He looked at her, really looked at her. Maybe for the first time, though she had worked in his building for 2.5 years. She was somewhere in her mid-30s. Dark shadows under her eyes that makeup hadn't quite covered. A crease in her blazer that suggested she'd slept in it, or near it. Her hair was pulled back in the functional way of someone who doesn't have time for anything else. She said, you've been working late every night. Claire said nothing. She said, your hands shake. A muscle jumped in Claire's jaw. She walked 11 blocks to tell me that, Dominic said. The air between them held that for a moment. She's a kid, Claire said finally, quietly. She worries more than she should. She always has. She said you used to sing when you cooked. Claire closed her eyes, just for a second. When she opened them, there was something raw in her face that she hadn't managed to control. I should take her home, she said. I'll make up the hours tomorrow morning. Or I can work from home tonight after she's in bed. I have the Barfield account to finish and I can. That's not what I'm asking, Dominic said. He sent them both home. That was the first thing. He told Claire to take Bea home, to eat dinner while it was still dinner time, to not open her laptop that night. She looked at him the way people look at things they want very much to believe, but have been disappointed by too many times. Like she was doing math on whether to trust it. You're serious, she said. I'm serious. She looked at her daughter, who was watching them both with the particular attentiveness of a child who has said what she came to say and is now waiting to see if it worked. Bea looked at Dominic. Thank you, she said, and then, with great seriousness, I left my book on the bench. Can I get it? He almost laughed. He didn't quite. He watched them go, the woman in the worn blazer and the small girl with the uneven braids, and stood in the lobby for a moment after they'd passed through the doors. Then he went back up to his office and sat at his desk for a long time without opening anything. His mother's name was Ruth. She'd worked 2 jobs for most of his childhood. The first at a hotel front desk, the second doing bookkeeping for a dry cleaner on weekends. He remembered her hands too, how they looked at the end of the week, dry and cracked from the cleaning products she handled, moving slowly over the dinner table like they had forgotten how to be at rest. She'd died at Simmons, 1, heart failure. The doctor had said, afterward, the kind of things doctors say, years of stress, inadequate sleep, the body eventually presenting the bill for what had been borrowed from it. Dominic had been 32. He'd already built the company by then. He'd thought, many times in the years since, about the particular cruelty of that timing. He'd had the money. He could have helped her sooner. He'd been working so hard to build something that he hadn't noticed she was still breaking herself. He sat at his desk and looked at his own reflection in the dark window. The glass gave him back a faint, ghostly version of himself, and thought about an 8-year-old girl who had written her concerns on notebook paper and walked 11 blocks and waited 45 minutes on a bench. She hadn't done it with anger. She hadn't accused him of anything. She had just laid out the facts, the way someone does when they believe the other person doesn't know, and they think that if the person just understood, things would be different. Dominic picked up his phone. He pulled up the internal HR files. He looked at the bookkeeping department's time-in, time-out records for the past 6 months. He looked for a long time. The next morning he called a meeting with the heads of accounting, operations, and HR. He told Troy to bring coffee and to clear the rest of his morning. I want to see the overtime data across all divisions, he said. Not aggregated, individual. Who's staying past 7 on a regular basis and why? I want names and I want the reasons, and I want them organized by department. Linda Chen, who'd been head of HR for 6 years and had never heard him say anything like this before, looked at him over the top of her reading glasses. Is this related to something specific? She asked. Yes, he said. She waited for him to say what. He didn't. She pulled up the data. It took 40 minutes to go through. When they were done, Dominic leaned back and was quiet for a moment. How many of these positions are understaffed? He asked. Linda hesitated. Technically or practically? Both. She set her pen down. Accounting is running lean, has been since the merger last spring. Claire's team was supposed to expand by 2 positions. The requisitions were filed but never funded. They've been absorbing the additional workload. Fund them, Dominic said. The budget committee meets in. Linda, he said. Fund them. She wrote something down. And I want to do a full review of remote work flexibility across divisions. Not just what's policy, what's practice. I want to know what people are actually doing and why and whether there's a reason they can't do it from home. David Park, the operations head, shifted in his seat. There are some departments where we've had concerns about productivity when, run the data, Dominic said. Don't give me assumptions. Give me numbers. He paused. If the numbers show a real problem, we address it. If they show what I think they'll show, we need to be having a different conversation about how we've been running things. David and Linda exchanged a look. In 9 years, they had not seen Dominic Harrell run a meeting like this. He was always sharp, always focused, but usually focused on margins and growth and market position. This felt different. One more thing, Dominic said. I want a company-wide communication going out today. It doesn't need to be long. It needs to say that leadership is reviewing workload distribution, and we take seriously our commitment to sustainable working conditions. He stood. I'll write it myself. He went to see Claire Sutton 3 days later. He didn't send a calendar invite. He didn't have Troy announce him. He walked down to the 4th floor at 10 in the morning and found her at her desk, head bent over her screen, a coffee cup at her elbow that was probably cold. She looked up when he stopped at her desk. Her expression did the same rapid calculation it had done in the lobby, assessing the situation, preparing for impact. Mr. Harrell, she said. Do you have a minute? She stood, straightening automatically, the reflexes of someone always prepared to account for herself. We're adding 2 positions to your team, he said. You'll be involved in the hiring process. That starts next week. He paused. The Barfield account has been carrying too much of the quarter's weight. I've talked to finance. We're going to rescope the timeline on 2 of the other projects so your team isn't absorbing that pressure for the next 2 months. Claire said nothing. She was very still. I also want to ask, he said, whether there are things about how this department has been operating that haven't been working, that maybe haven't made it up the chain to me. He looked at her. I'd like you to think about that and come talk to me about it. Not as a formal report, just a conversation. The color in her cheeks shifted slightly. You don't have to do this because of Bea, she said quietly. I'm not doing it because of Bea, he said. I'm doing it because I looked at the data and the data is clear. Your team has been doing the work of a team that's 40% larger. That's not your fault and it's not sustainable, and it should have been addressed before now. He paused. Bea just made me look at the data. Claire looked at her desk, at her cold coffee, at some point in the middle distance. She told me your hands shake, he said. When you eat dinner, she watches you when you think she's not looking. Claire put one hand flat on her desk, briefly, a steadying gesture. Then she took a breath. She's always been like that, she said softly. She notices everything. I used to think I was protecting her, but she stopped. She's been worried about me for a long time. I didn't realize she was carrying that much of it. She carried it 11 blocks, Dominic said. Something broke a little in Claire's expression. Just at the edges. She's a good kid, she said. Her voice was slightly uneven. She is, Dominic said. She also gave me a fairly thorough overview of cortisol and cardiovascular risk, which I appreciated. Claire laughed. It came out of her before she could stop it. A surprised, exhausted, genuine laugh. It was the kind of laugh that has tears just behind it. She looked it up, Claire said. I know, she told me. He did not transform overnight. That is not what happened. And anyone who tells you a story where one conversation changes everything is leaving out how long everything actually takes. What happened was, he started looking at things differently, slowly, in ways that built on each other. He approved the new positions in accounting and followed the hiring process more closely than he normally would have. He ran the remote work data review and discovered that 2 departments had been enforcing in-office requirements for productivity reasons that weren't borne out by any actual number, just habit and assumption. He changed the policy. He started asking, in executive meetings, a question that he'd never asked before. What does the workload actually look like for the people doing this? His executives noticed. Some of them adapted easily. One of them pushed back, Marcus Devon, the head of commercial development, who believed that the drive to work beyond what was comfortable was the engine of the company's success. They had a long conversation about that in Dominic's office, and it was not a comfortable one. You're describing people as machinery, Dominic said. I'm describing results, Marcus said. Machinery breaks down, Dominic said. We've been running at a pace that breaks people down. The data shows me that we've lost 4 senior people in 18 months from accounting alone. Do you know what the institutional knowledge cost of that is? Do you know what it costs to hire and train at that level? Marcus sat with that. This isn't charity, Dominic said. This is strategy. The question is whether we want to build something that lasts or something that grinds through people until they leave or fall apart. He paused. I've seen both outcomes up close. I know which one I want. He ran into Bea again unexpectedly. About 6 weeks later, Claire had stayed late one evening, voluntarily, to finish a project she'd chosen to take on, which was already different, and Bea had come to the office after school to wait for her. She was in the lobby again when Dominic came down at the end of the day, on the same bench, legs swinging, but this time she had her library book open. She looked up when she saw him. Hi, she said. Hi, Bea. I have a different book this time, she said, showing him the cover. It was something about marine biology, sharks and deep-sea creatures. I like sharks, she offered, conversationally. Do you? They have to keep moving or they die, she said. Some of them. The ones that can't pump water through their gills while they're still. They have to stay in motion or they suffocate. She considered this. I read that and I thought that's kind of sad. But then I thought maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't know what it would feel like to rest. Dominic looked at her for a moment. That's a pretty sophisticated reading of a biology fact, he said. My teacher says I read above my level, she said without pride, just as another data point. He sat down on the bench beside her, which surprised him. He hadn't planned to. He had a car waiting and 3 calls to return and a dinner he was already going to be slightly late for. How's your mom? He asked. Bea thought about it. Better, she said. She cooked last Tuesday and she was humming. Not full singing, but humming. She said this with the gravity of a scientist reporting early promising results. Her hands don't shake as much. Dominic nodded. She got home before 7 every night last week, Bea said. I counted. That's good. She seems less tired. Bea paused. She still worries, but it's like regular worrying now, not the other kind. What's the other kind? The kind where they're trying not to show it, Bea said simply. You can always tell. He thought about his mother again. About how she'd said I'm fine, Dominic in the same way, over the phone, the last few years. About how he'd believed her because he'd needed to, because the alternative was harder to sit with. You did a brave thing, he told Bea. Coming here the way you did, she shrugged. I was scared, she said. But I was more scared of the other thing. Being scared of something doesn't mean you weren't brave, he said. It means the opposite. She considered him. My mom says you're different now, she said. At work. She says the meetings are different. He hadn't known Claire talked about work at home. But of course she did. Of course she came home from a place where she'd spent half her waking hours, and her daughter, who noticed everything, had been listening. Different how? He asked. She says you ask better questions now. Bea tilted her head. She said it like it was a big deal. I didn't really understand why that would be a big deal. Asking questions seems easy. It's harder than it looks, Dominic said. Sometimes you're so sure you know the answer that you stop asking. Bea absorbed this. Like with sharks, she said. They keep moving because they've always kept moving. They don't know to ask if there's another way. He looked at her. 8 years old, with a library book about marine biology and 11 blocks of practical courage, explaining things to him. Yeah, he said. Like that. In the spring, Claire Sutton was named head of accounting operations. A new role, one that Dominic had structured in large part around the skills she'd been demonstrating for 2 years without anyone having named them. It came with a different title and a different salary and, for the first time in a long time, a job description that matched what she was actually doing. She came to tell him thank you in his office, standing in front of his desk, not quite sure what to do with her hands. This isn't charity, he said, before she could get to the part where she tried to give it back. I know, she said. You said that once before. I'm saying it again. You've been managing 3 people's worth of responsibility. This is what the job should have been. She looked at him steadily. The new hires are good, she said. Both of them. The team is. It's different. The energy is different. I know. I've seen the output numbers. She almost smiled. Bea wants me to invite you to her school's science night, she said. She's doing a display on deep-sea adaptation, specifically on sharks. A pause. She said you'd probably be busy, but that I should ask anyway. Dominic looked down at his desk, at the calendar on his screen, the grid of obligations and meetings that made up his days. When is it? He asked. She told him. He looked at the date. He had a dinner that night. He could move it. Tell her I'll be there, he said. Claire smiled then, a full one, the kind that takes over the whole face, and it occurred to him that she probably hadn't looked like that in this office, in this building, in a very long time. She'll want to explain the whole thing to you, Claire said. Start to finish. I'll warn you it takes a while. I have time, Dominic said. And sitting at his desk in the late afternoon, the city spread out in the window behind him. He thought about the bench in the lobby and a small girl with uneven braids and 11 blocks of nerve, and about his mother Ruth, and about how long it sometimes takes to learn to ask the right questions. He thought, some of the most important things that ever happened to him arrived without an appointment. He thought, it's not too late to notice.